The Guardian's Awakening. The crystalline chamber pulsed with an ancient energy that made Dr. Sarah Chen's instruments go haywire. Massive geometric patterns carved into alien metal stretched from floor to ceiling, telling a story she couldn't yet read. But it wasn't the architecture that drew her attention, it was the being suspended within the translucent crystal core. Remarkable preservation, she whispered, adjusting her scanner. The alien warrior was easily 3 meters tall, its armor seemingly carved from living metal that shifted colors like oil on water. What appeared to be wings were folded tightly against its back, and its face was hidden behind an intricate helm that seemed to capture starlight itself. Dr. Chen, Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through her comm. The Galactic Council representatives are demanding we cease all activities immediately. They're saying this site is restricted under Section 7 of the Ancient Artifacts Treaty. Sarah fought back a surge of frustration. After 3 years of searching, she'd finally found proof of the Guardian species, ancient protectors spoken of in countless alien texts. She wasn't about to let bureaucracy stop her now. Tell them we're conducting a standard archaeological survey under Earth Federation Charter, she replied, continuing her scans. They can file a formal protest through proper channels. The crystal chamber's pulse suddenly quickened, matching her own heartbeat. The warrior's armor began to resonate, creating harmonics that made her teeth ache. This wasn't just stasis technology, it was responding to her presence. Sarah, they're threatening to revoke Earth's trading privileges, Rodriguez warned. Whatever you found, it's got them terrified. The crystal's surface began to crack, hairline fractures spreading like lightning across its face. Sarah's instruments screamed with readings off the scale. She should run, she knew that. But something held her in place. Curiosity, certainly, but something more. A feeling she couldn't explain. The crystal shattered. The warrior fell forward, catching itself with inhuman grace despite millennia of imprisonment. Its helm retracted like liquid metal, revealing a face that was both alien and somehow familiar, sharp angles and iridescent skin, eyes that held galaxies within them. I am Kethros, it spoke, its voice resonating directly in her mind. Last of the Guardian Sentinel caste. You have awakened me, human. Sarah stood her ground as Kethros rose to its full height. Alarms blared throughout the complex, and she could hear the heavy footfalls of security forces approaching. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Earth Federation xenoarchaeologist. And I think I've been looking for you for a very long time. Kethros tilted its head, studying her with those impossible eyes. You're not afraid. Should I be? The others always were. For countless cycles, species discovered my resting place. All fled in terror, sealing me away again and again. Yet you remain. The security forces burst in, plasma rifles trained on Kethros. The warrior didn't even acknowledge them, its attention fixed solely on Sarah. Stand down, she ordered the security team, never breaking eye contact with Kethros. He's not a threat. You cannot know that, Dr. Chen, the lead security officer argued. The Galactic Council's warnings about the site. The Council fears what it cannot control, Kethros interrupted, its mental voice tinged with something like amusement. They are right to fear me. But you, Sarah Chen, you seek understanding rather than control. This is unexpected. The chamber's crystals continued to pulse, but now they seemed to be responding to Kethros, creating patterns of light that danced across the walls. Sarah's scanner was capturing readings that would revolutionize their understanding of ancient technology, but she barely noticed. The implications of this moment went far beyond scientific discovery. The Council says you're a weapon, she said. But that's not true, is it? You're a guardian. A protector. I am what I choose to be, Kethros replied. As are all sentient beings. The Council forgot this truth long ago, preferring to see things as either weapons or tools. It is why they feared my kind. Why they fear humanity now. Sarah's calm crackled again. Dr. Chen, we have multiple Council warships entering orbit. They're demanding we surrender the site and the asset immediately. Kethros's armor rippled, wings beginning to unfold. They come to seal me away again. To ensure their power remains unchallenged. We won't let them, Sarah declared, surprising herself with her own conviction. You've been in prison long enough. Whatever's coming, whatever made you choose to enter stasis in the first place, we'll face it together. The warrior was silent for a long moment, those stellar eyes searching her face. Then, for the first time in millennia, Kethros smiled. Perhaps, it said, there is hope for this cycle after all. Above them, the council warships began their descent, their intentions clear. But in that crystal chamber, something unprecedented was taking place, a bond forming between human and Guardian that would shake the foundations of galactic society. The next few hours would determine whether that bond would herald a new age of cooperation or spark a conflict that would consume the stars themselves. Sarah Chen had spent her career searching for answers about humanity's place in the cosmos. Now, standing beside an awakened Guardian while alarms blared and warships descended, she realized those answers might come with a price higher than anyone had imagined. Breaking barriers. The Earth Federation's diplomatic chamber aboard the starship Horizon hummed with tension. Through the vast viewport, the Council warships loomed like predatory birds, their weapons systems barely contained behind paper-thin diplomatic protocols. Dr. Sarah Chen stood before the emergency committee, acutely aware of Kethros's towering presence beside her. The Council's ultimatum is clear, Admiral Hayes announced, his weathered face grave. Either we surrender the Guardian to their custody, or they'll declare Earth in violation of galactic law. Our colonies would lose all protection under the Mutual Defense Treaty. They speak of law while threatening violence, Kethros observed, its mental voice reaching everyone in the chamber. Several committee members flinched at the direct contact. Some things never change, even after 50,000 years. Sarah stepped forward. What the Council doesn't understand is that Kethros isn't a prisoner or a weapon. He's a sentinel, part of an ancient order that protected all sentient life. We need to understand why he was awakened now. Dr. Chin, a diplomatic officer, interrupted, with all due respect, your archaeological theories are correct, Kethros stated. The chamber's lights flickered as its armor shifted, displaying cascading patterns that seemed to tell stories in light. We were created to stand watch against a darkness your young species has not yet encountered. The Council knows this truth, though they hide it even from themselves. Sarah's research tablets projected ancient star charts, overlaid with data from her recent discoveries. The Guardian outposts I've found all point to something coming from the galactic core. Something that appears in the oldest legends of every spacefaring race. Admiral Hayes leaned forward. What exactly are we dealing with? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communications array burst to life. A holographic figure materialized, High Counselor Vextari, its insectoid features arranged in what passed for diplomatic concern among its species. Federation representatives, it chittered, your time has expired. The asset you have illegally awakened must be surrendered immediately. The danger it poses. The danger, Kethros interrupted, causing the hologram to recoil, is your willful ignorance, Counselor. Your predecessors knew what we guarded against. They chose to forget, finding comfort in empire building while the true threat grew stronger. Sarah watched the interchange, her mind racing. The Council's fear seemed rooted in something deeper than mere political control. Counselor, she ventured, our records show that your species was one of the first to achieve spaceflight. Surely your archives contain information about the Guardian's purpose. The hologram flickered, Vextari's mandibles clicking rapidly. That information is sealed by ancient decree. The humans cannot comprehend. Breaking barriers. The Earth Federation's diplomatic chamber aboard the starship Horizon hummed with tension. Through the vast viewport, the Council warships loomed like predatory birds, their weapons systems barely contained behind paper-thin diplomatic protocols. Dr. Sarah Chin stood before the emergency committee, acutely aware of Kethros's towering presence beside her. The Council's ultimatum is clear, Admiral Hayes announced, his weathered face grave. Either we surrender the Guardian to their custody, or they'll declare Earth in violation of galactic law. Our colonies would lose all protection under the Mutual Defense Treaty. They speak of law while threatening violence, Kethros observed, its mental voice reaching everyone in the chamber. Several committee members flinched at the direct contact. Some things never change, even after 50,000 years. Sarah stepped forward. What the council doesn't understand is that Kethros isn't a prisoner or a weapon. He's a sentinel, part of an ancient order that protected all sentient life. We need to understand why he was awakened now. Dr. Chin, a diplomatic officer, interrupted, with all due respect, your archaeological theories are correct, Kethros stated. The chamber's lights flickered as its armor shifted, displaying cascading patterns that seemed to tell stories in light. We were created to stand watch against a darkness your young species has not yet encountered. The council knows this truth, though they hide it even from themselves. Sarah's research tablets projected ancient star charts, overlaid with data from her recent discoveries. The Guardian outposts I've found all point to something coming from the galactic core. Something that appears in the oldest legends of every spacefaring race. Admiral Hayes leaned forward. What exactly are we dealing with? Before anyone could respond, the chamber's communications array burst to life. A holographic figure materialized, High Counselor Vextari, its insectoid features arranged in what passed for diplomatic concern among its species. Federation representatives, it chittered, your time has expired. The asset you have illegally awakened must be surrendered immediately. The danger it poses. The danger, Kethros interrupted, causing the hologram to recoil, is your willful ignorance, Counselor. Your predecessors knew what we guarded against. They chose to forget, finding comfort in empire building while the true threat grew stronger. Sarah watched the interchange, her mind racing. The Council's fear seemed rooted in something deeper than mere political control. Counselor, she ventured, our records show that your species was one of the first to achieve spaceflight. Surely your archives contain information about the Guardian's purpose. The hologram flickered, Vextari's mandibles clicking rapidly. That information is sealed by ancient decree. The humans cannot comprehend. The Admiral was already issuing orders, preparing for the diplomatic storm that would follow. But Sarah's attention was on the star charts, on the patterns she'd spent years studying. Somewhere out there, the void tide was growing stronger. The galaxy's oldest nightmare was stirring, and humanity had just volunteered to stand on the front lines. The hidden truth. The ancient archives beneath the Council's capital city stretched for kilometers, a labyrinth of knowledge that few were permitted to enter. Dr. Sarah Chen walked its crystalline corridors beside Kethros, their footsteps echoing through millennia of stored wisdom. The emergency session had granted them limited access, a concession won through hours of tense negotiation. They've tried to bury it, Sarah muttered, scanning the encoded data streams that flowed through the crystal walls. But data leaves traces, even after thousands of years. Kethros moved with liquid grace, its armor resonating with the archive's ancient systems. The Council believes knowledge can be contained, controlled. They never understood that truth, like the void tide itself, finds its way through any barrier. Their search had already revealed disturbing patterns. Every 500,000 years, civilizations at the galaxy's core would go silent. The Council's predecessors had documented these extinctions, but always sealed the records, choosing to forget rather than face the horror of what approached. Here, Sarah said suddenly, her scanner pulsing with discovered data. These energy signatures, they match the patterns from your stasis chamber. The archive's crystals responded to Kethros's presence, projecting a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Dark tendrils spread from the core, like ink dropped in clear water. The void tide feeds on consciousness itself, Kethros explained, its mental voice heavy with memory. It devours thought, emotion, identity, leaving only empty shells that serve its hunger. My kind were created to stand against it, to shepherd younger races to safety when it stirred. Sarah watched the simulation with growing dread. But something went wrong during the last cycle. We were betrayed. Kethros's armor darkened, reflecting the pain of ancient wounds. Not by anyone's species, but by fear itself. The Council of that era decided that knowledge of the void tide was too dangerous, that it would cause panic among their peoples. They used weapons meant to fight the tide against us instead, forcing most of my kind into stasis. The archive's crystals surged with recovered data, showing scenes of that betrayal. Guardian vessels ambushed by combined Council fleets, their own defensive systems turned against them. Sarah felt her heart ache at the tragedy of it. And now the tide returns, but the galaxy has forgotten how to fight it, she concluded. A new presence made them both turn. Councillor Vextari emerged from the shadows, flanked by other council representatives. Perhaps forgetting was wisdom, the insectoid leader chittered. Look what remembering has brought. Chaos, defiance, the disruption of order. Your order is an illusion, Kethros responded, its wings flexing with barely contained emotion. The void tide cares nothing for your hierarchies, your careful political balance. It will consume all equally. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady. The data is clear, Counselor. The tide's advance matches every previous cycle. But this time, we have a chance to prepare, to unite against it. Unite? Vextari's mandibles clicked rapidly. Under human leadership? Your species is barely out of its gravity well. You cannot comprehend the complexities. We comprehend that survival demands action, Sarah interrupted. Humanity may be young, but we've faced extinction before. We know the cost of division in the face of existential threats. The archive trembled as new data cascaded through its systems. The galactic map updated, showing current readings from deep space sensors. The dark tendrils had grown, reaching further than anyone had admitted. 7 systems have already gone silent, one of the other counselors said quietly. We classified the information to prevent panic. Kethros's mental voice filled the chamber. And how many more will you sacrifice to maintain your precious order? The question hung in the air as the map continued its brutal display. Sarah noticed something in the data stream, a pattern she'd seen in her archaeological studies. The Guardian outposts, she said suddenly. They're not just warning stations, are they? They form a network. A shield, Kethros confirmed. One that could be reactivated, if the Council would abandon its fear and work with us. Vextari's compound, I studied them both. You ask us to trust a weapon we can barely control, guided by a species that doesn't understand its place in the galaxy. No, Sarah replied firmly. We're asking you to remember who you were before fear ruled your decisions. The records show your ancestors fought alongside the Guardians. They were heroes. The chamber fell silent as ancient and modern truths collided. The map's dark tendrils continued their relentless advance, a countdown that cared nothing for politics or pride. The choice is simple, Kethros stated. Unite or face the void tide alone. Even your mighty council cannot survive that. Sarah watched the counselors' reactions, seeing the first cracks in their carefully maintained facade of control. The truth was out now, burning through centuries of deliberate ignorance. The galaxy stood at a crossroads, and humanity's determination to face the truth head-on had helped put it there. But as she studied the data showing the void tide's advance, Sarah realized that discovering the truth was only the beginning. The real test would be whether the galaxy's disparate species could overcome their fears and traditions to face this threat together. Kethros's presence brushed her mind, sharing memories of battles fought when the galaxy was young. Hope, the Guardian conveyed silently, often comes from unexpected sources. Your kind has reminded me of this. The archive's crystals pulsed with urgency, reflecting the weight of the moment. The next few decisions would determine not just the fate of humanity or the Council, but of all conscious life in the galaxy. The void tide was coming, and with it, a test of everything Sarah believed about courage, unity, and the power of facing hard truths. Trust and betrayal. The emergency council session had lasted 3 days, transforming the Grand Assembly Chamber into an arena of shifting alliances and whispered conspiracies. Dr. Sarah Chen watched from humanity's newly granted observation platform as species that hadn't spoken to each other in centuries now argued about the void tide's approach. They debate while darkness spreads, Kethros observed, its massive form casting shifting shadows across the platform. Some habits transcend time. Sarah studied the latest data streaming across her tablet. 3 more systems have gone dark. The tide is accelerating. Below them, the Council's inner chamber had erupted into chaos. A coalition of militant species, led by the warrior caste Drachnid, was demanding immediate action, specifically, control of Kethros and access to Guardian technology. The humans cannot be trusted with such power, the Drachnid ambassador roared, his scaled crown flaring with aggression. We demand the Guardian be transferred to proper military authority. Admiral Hayes, representing Earth, stood his ground. Kethros is not a weapon to be claimed. He's a sentient being who chose to work with humanity because we approached with understanding, not force. Sarah felt a subtle shift in the chamber's atmosphere. Something was wrong. Kethros tensed beside her, its armor rippling with alert patterns she'd learned to read. The Drachnid's words hide deeper intentions, the Guardian communicated privately to her. They've made arrangements. Betrayal comes. Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the council complex. Emergency barriers slammed down, sealing the chamber. The observation platform's controls went dark. This is a security intervention, the Drachnid ambassador announced, his voice now cold with authority. Under Emergency Protocol 7, the Council's military coalition is assuming control of all Guardian assets. For the safety of the galaxy. Heavily armed troops materialized from concealed transport points, a clear violation of Council sanctuary laws. They carried weapons Sarah had never seen before, crackling with energy that made Kethros's armor resonate. Guardian killer technology, Kethros explained, wings unfurling. Preserved from the betrayal of the last cycle. They mean to force my compliance or return me to stasis. Admiral Hayes was already moving, positioning Earth's security detail to protect their position. This is an act of war, he declared. Earth does not recognize your authority. But Sarah noticed something else, subtle movements among the other council members. Not everyone was surprised by this coup attempt. Fear had driven them to desperate measures. You don't understand what you're risking, Sarah called out, her voice carrying across the chamber. The Guardian network can't be activated through force. It requires willing cooperation. The Drachnid ambassador laughed, a sound like grinding stones. Cooperation is a luxury we can no longer afford. The void tide approaches, and we will not entrust our survival to untested humans and their pet guardian. Energy weapons powered up, filling the air with the scent of ozone. Sarah saw Earth's security forces preparing to fight, knowing they were hopelessly outgunned. This was about to become a bloodbath. But Kethros had other plans. The Guardian's form began to shift, its armor flowing like liquid starlight. The chamber's ancient systems responded to its presence, crystals pulsing with power that hadn't been channeled in millennia. You speak of force, Kethros's mental voice thundered through every mind present. Let me show you true power. The chamber's barriers shattered as waves of energy pulsed from the Guardian's form. The coalition troops' weapons crackled and died, their Guardian killer technology useless against the very being it was designed to cage. I could destroy you all, Kethros continued, its form now blazing with contained power. As my kind could have destroyed your ancestors when they turned against us. But that is not our purpose. We protect. We preserve. Even those who fear us. Sarah stepped forward, placing her hand on Kethros's armor. The energy coursing through it should have vaporized her, but instead, it flowed around her like a warm breeze. This is exactly what happened before, she announced to the stunned chamber. Fear led to betrayal, and betrayal left us vulnerable. The void tide doesn't need to destroy us, we're doing its work for it, turning against each other instead of uniting. Admiral Hayes seized the moment. Earth offers a different path. Not control, but collaboration. Not force, but understanding. The Guardian network was built to protect all sentient life. Let it serve that purpose again. The chamber hung in tense silence. The Drachnid ambassador's scales had paled, his coup attempt thoroughly defeated. But more importantly, Sarah could see the other council members watching, evaluating, beginning to understand. The humans speak truth, a new voice rang out. Councillor Vextari stepped forward, surprising everyone. We have lived so long in fear that we forgot why we feared. The void tide approaches, yes. But perhaps it is time to remember courage as well. The energy in the chamber slowly subsided as Kethros returned to its normal form. The Guardian's presence in Sarah's mind carried a mixture of approval and sadness. They will need time to accept change, it communicated privately. but you have shown them a path forward. Sometimes that is enough. Sarah watched as the council chamber erupted in new debate, not about control and force now, but about cooperation and preparation. The coup had failed, but it had also broken the paralysis of fear. Now the real work could begin. The void tide was still coming. But instead of facing it divided by fear and paranoia, there was a chance the galaxy would meet it united. All because humanity had chosen to approach an ancient warrior with curiosity instead of terror. As emergency repairs began around them, Sarah couldn't help but smile at the irony. In trying to seize control of a Guardian, the militant faction had only proved why the Guardians had chosen to work with humans in the first place. Sometimes the strongest power wasn't force at all, but the courage to trust. The coming storm. The observation deck of Earth's flagship Horizon offered a perfect view of the impossible. Sarah Chun stood at the viewport, watching as the void tide consumed another star, its darkness spreading like ink through space itself. Behind her, representatives from 30 species worked in unified purpose, their fears forgotten in the face of extinction. The network is responding, Kethros announced, its mental voice reaching all present. The Guardian's armor pulsed with starlight as it interfaced with ancient systems being awakened across the galaxy. But we will have only one chance. The past week had transformed the galaxy. As the void tide's advance accelerated, the Council's rigid hierarchy had given way to desperate cooperation. Ships from ancient enemies now flew together, following plans drawn from Guardian archives and human tactical innovations. Defense grid reports ready, Admiral Hayes announced, his hologram flickering above the command table. All Guardian outposts are synchronized with Kethros' signal. Whatever happens, Earth stands with you. Sarah's scanners showed the full scope of what they faced. The void tide wasn't just darkness, it was anti-life itself, a cosmic force that devoured consciousness and left only empty husks behind. Already, billions had been lost in the outer systems. Energy patterns are stabilizing, she reported, checking the readings from the reactivated Guardian network. The outposts are accepting the activation codes. But something was wrong. The darkness was moving with purpose now, as if aware of their preparations. Tendrils of void stretched across space like grasping fingers, probing their defenses. It remembers, Kethros said suddenly, its mental voice tight with realization. Each cycle, it learns. It knows what defeated it before. The command center erupted in alarm as new readings poured in. The void tide wasn't just approaching, it was surrounding them, cutting off escape routes, herding the combined fleet exactly where it wanted them. It's intelligent, Sarah breathed, watching the tactical display. All this time, we thought it was just a force of nature, but it's been playing us. Every retreat, every evacuation, we've been following its plan. Kethros' armor darkened with understanding. It has been awake far longer than we realized. The Council's fear, the divisions between species, it has been feeding on them, growing stronger. Emergency alerts flashed across every screen as the void tendrils began their final approach. The combined fleet's weapons seemed to vanish into the darkness without effect. Even the Guardian outpost's ancient defenses barely slowed its advance. We need to adapt, Sarah insisted, her mind racing. If it knows the old Guardian protocols, we need something it hasn't seen before. Something unpredictable. The darkness pressed closer, and Sarah felt its hunger, not just for life, but for thought itself. This was consciousness turned against consciousness, a darkness that had grown fat on fear and division. The network, she said suddenly, turning to Kethros. You said it was built to protect all sentient life. What if we did more than just activate it? What if we linked everyone together? The Guardian's cosmic eyes widened. Such a connection has never been attempted. The strain could destroy minds unprepared for it. But it would give us something the void tide has never faced. Unity not just in action, but in thought. Real cooperation, not just parallel forces fighting separately. Admiral Hayes stepped forward. The risk is better than extinction, Sarah finished. She looked around the command center, meeting the eyes and eye equivalents of dozens of species. We've spent so long afraid of each other. Maybe that's exactly what it wanted. Kethros studied her for a long moment, stellar eyes swirling with ancient knowledge. To attempt this, I would need to link with every mind in the fleet simultaneously. The energy required. Use me as a conduit, Sarah offered. You and I already have a connection. Build on that. The void tendrils were almost upon them now. Ships at the fleet's edge began to go dark as the consciousness-devouring effect took hold. There was no more time for debate. Do it, Admiral Hayes commanded. All ships, prepare for neural synchronization. Whatever happens, we face it together. Kethros's form began to shine with impossible light as the Guardian accessed the full power of its ancient network. Sarah felt the connection between them expand, growing to encompass first the command center, then the entire fleet. Thousands of minds linked together, their thoughts merging into something greater than any one species could achieve alone. Through their combined consciousness, Sarah felt the true nature of their enemy and understood what had to be done. The void tide had fed on division and fear for millions of years. But now, for the first time, it faced a unified galaxy. Not just ships flying together, but minds working as one, each contributing their unique perspectives to a greater whole. As the darkness closed in, humanity's greatest strength, the ability to unite diverse viewpoints, became the galaxy's last hope. The final battle was about to begin, and its outcome would determine not just the fate of individual species, but the very nature of consciousness itself. A new dawn. The universe changed the moment all minds joined as one. Through their shared consciousness, Sarah Chin experienced existence as thousands of species did, the crystalline thought patterns of the Vextari, the quantum state awareness of the Drachnid, the multidimensional perspectives of races she'd never even met. At the center of it all stood Kethros, the Guardian's presence binding them together like a star holding planets in orbit. The void tide reacts, Admiral Hayes's thoughts echoed through their shared awareness. It's never encountered resistance like this. The darkness surrounding their fleet writhed and pulsed, its usual methodical advance giving way to chaotic movement. Through their unified consciousness, they could finally see it clearly, not just as a force of destruction, but as a vast, ancient intelligence that had evolved to feed on division and fear. Now we understand, Kethros's mental voice resonated through them all. It doesn't just consume consciousness, it creates the conditions for its feeding. The conflicts between species, the paranoia, the endless cycles of distrust, all carefully cultivated over millions of years. Sarah felt the combined knowledge of thousands of civilizations flowing through her mind. In that moment of perfect unity, patterns became clear that no single species could have recognized alone. The Guardian network she broadcast to their shared consciousness. It was never just a weapon system. It's a key to something larger. Through their combined awareness, they could see the true purpose of the ancient outposts scattered across the galaxy. Each one was part of a vast pattern, a design that transcended physical space. The Guardians hadn't built a defense system, they'd created a template for consciousness itself. The void tide struck then, its darkness crashing against their unified minds like a wave of absolute cold. Ships began to buckle as reality itself warped around them. But where before it would have found isolated pockets of resistance to devour one by one, now it faced something unprecedented, a unified consciousness that spanned species and space. The pattern, Sarah projected, her thoughts merging with Kethros's ancient knowledge. We need to complete it. Everyone, focus your consciousness through the network. The combined fleet moved as one, ships positioning themselves in harmony with the Guardian outposts. As they aligned, energy began to flow between them, creating geometric patterns of light that cut through the void. The tide reacted violently, its darkness coalescing into massive tentacles that sought to tear apart their unity. But with each attack, the connection between minds grew stronger. Species that had warred for centuries now shared their deepest thoughts, their hopes and fears becoming one. We are what you feared, Kethros proclaimed, its consciousness amplified by billions of unified minds. Not just life that resists, but life that transcends division. The galaxy remembers its true nature. Through their shared awareness, Sarah felt the moment everything changed. The patterns of light from the Guardian network weren't just illuminating space, They were illuminating consciousness itself. The void tide had spent eons feeding on darkness, but it had never faced the full radiance of unified thought. Reality trembled as two fundamental forces collided, the darkness that devoured consciousness and consciousness unified in defiance of darkness. The void tentacles began to dissolve, unable to maintain their form in the face of such perfect cooperation. "Push harder," Admiral Hayes urged through their link. "We have it on the defensive for the first time in history." Every mind in the fleet focused their thoughts through the Guardian network, adding their unique perspective to the whole. The pattern of light grew stronger, more complex, extending beyond physical space into dimensions only consciousness could touch. The void tide tried one final, desperate attack. It showed them visions of their worst fears, tried to rekindle ancient hatreds and divisions. But in their unified state, they could see these attacks for what they were, the last gasps of a predator whose prey had evolved beyond its reach. Together, Sarah broadcast, her consciousness merging completely with Kethrosa's. Complete the pattern. Light exploded from every Guardian outpost, every ship, every unified mind. The pattern snapped into place, not just a defense against darkness, but a new framework for consciousness itself. The void tide's darkness began to unravel, its very nature unable to exist in a reality defined by unity rather than division. As the last traces of darkness dissipated, the unified consciousness experienced something none of them had expected, not just victory, but transformation. They had become something new, something that transcended the boundaries between species while preserving what made each unique. Slowly, carefully, Kethros began to separate their minds, returning each consciousness to its individual form. But the connection remained, a subtle link that bound them all together in understanding, if not direct thought. Sarah opened her eyes to find herself back on the horizon's observation deck. The void was gone, replaced by stars that seemed to shine brighter than before. Around her, representatives of 30 species looked at each other with new eyes, forever changed by what they had shared. "The threat is ended," Kethros announced, its mental voice now gentle with emotion. "But more importantly, the galaxy has remembered what it can become." Admiral Hayes looked out at the transformed space before them. "The Council will need to change. Everything will need to change." "It already has," Sarah said softly, feeling the lingering connection between all who had participated in the battle. "We've experienced true unity. There's no going back from that." Kethros's armor shifted, reflecting the starlight in new patterns. "My kind waited eons for this moment, not just for species to unite against darkness, but to unite in purpose." The Guardian network was never meant to be a weapon. It was meant to be a bridge. As the combined fleet began its journey home, Sarah watched the stars with new eyes. The galaxy had faced its greatest threat and emerged not just victorious, but transformed. The void tide had fed on fear and division for millions of years, never realizing it was teaching its prey the ultimate lesson, that true strength lies not in separation, but in unity. The ancient warrior and the human scientist stood together at the viewport, watching the dawn of a new era. They had set out to save consciousness from darkness, but in doing so, they had helped consciousness evolve into something greater. The future was uncertain, but it would be faced together. And in the end, that made all the difference.